The first time I knew.
I first knew.
So the first time that I knew.
The first time that I knew.
So the first time that I knew.
The first time I knew.
First time I knew.
First time that I knew.
First time I knew.
I knew.
The first time I knew.
The first time I knew.
First time I knew.
The first time I knew.
When did I first know that Di and Bri were in love?
I was living in Di in New York.
When I went to DC.
She brought him home the first time a couple years ago.
Ryan and Diana were in love was... What? Ryan? Yeah. I've known him for 6 years. I'm pretty sure it's Ryan. I'm in his wedding. I'm doing a wedding video.
When Diana had just come home from Yahoo Sales Conference in 2009.
We were in this crazy bar in New York City.
I gotta be honest, I actually can't remember the first time.
September 2009, her and I, just the two of us, went to Spain.
He saw me and he'd had a huge glow on his face.
Actually, shouldn't I introduce myself first?
We were at some bar, which I can't remember, but I know we were in the East Village or the Lower East Side.
I knew that Brian and Dan were in love when they met in middle school.
Well, I thought I knew that Brian was in love with me.
That's Ryan. That's a picture of Ryan. No,
Probably recognize me best from the short-lived series Arctic Gone Wild, Penguins in Heat.
And, Brian and Diana.
She told me there was like a talent show, a couple of people I knew, Brian being one of them was in there.
Probably a while ago, and I probably just don't have that good of a memory anymore.
And they had just gotten back from a trip to St. Martin.
It was like all Brian's sisters. Di and Bri flew down. We were all kicking it. I think we were at Claire's place.
I'm also the fourth most strikingly handsome of all the groomsmen. Sorry, Dan, 5th place isn't that bad. It's just not worthy of a ribbon in a swim meet.
I kind of realized that he wasn't in love with me when he would ask, how does Di take her cappuccino? Or, does Di like dark or extra dark chocolate?
The first time I knew Brian and Diana were in love was a series of events, really.
She and I were working in the kitchen putting breakfast together.
And I remember walking into this bar and it was jam-packed and the music was extremely loud.
I went to one of the sidewalk cafes nearby. And I had never met Brian before, so I started asking about him.
I was about 99.9% sure that Brian was the guy for Di the first time I met him. Diana showed me this video that Brian had put together for her after their trip.
I knew immediately that Brian was seriously in love with Diana.
Moving forward, a couple weeks, maybe a month, my boss comes over to me and asks me if he can talk to me.
Knowing Diana my whole life as my older cousin, she's always been very happy and grateful, and I have always looked up to her for that.
I've known Brian for most of my life, since he used to have a runny nose constantly back in First Communion.
I knew that I liked Diana before I had even met her.
Brian had won tickets, like in a poker game, a bit of a gambler that one is, to the maiden voyage.
I remember we were in a room, I assume it was Claire's, there was like stairs and everyone was in the back and we were all like kind of just hanging out.
That night out when he turned down that 7th prostitute.
Slowly that story led to the story of what happened after the talent show, which was Diana in Brian's room getting her own little private talent show with him playing the guitar and singing for her.
Right away she started telling stories about him. You could see her face light up. She just was really excited.
I remember this because the song that was playing, this is gonna sound super random, was Kings of Leon, The Sex is on Fire.
Brian came down, and he sat at the kitchen table, and we were all talking.
He pulls me into a conference room and says, you know, I really have to talk to you about something. Here I am sweating. You know, thinking about calling my parents and telling them I'm moving home because I'm getting fired.
Diana was actually on this voyage as well. And he ran into her at some point, and I think he just impressed her with his like artistic talent. She had seen some sketches of his, and he ended up actually drawing her at one point in the buff. But that's neither here nor there.
You see this guy from across the bar, and he just comes running towards me, and he's like, "Bird!" and gives me a huge hug. And so that I was 99.9% sure.
And it was all of the pictures from their trip put to music, including a Lady Gaga dance break session that Diana did. And Brian called it Lady Di Di.
The episode of Maury Povich, he went on, and it turned out he was not the father.
Brian would tell me stories about this girl who he had met at work, who just wouldn't give him the time of day.
I remember she told me a story. She's like, when I first met him, you know, I just was mean to him, didn't give him the time of day.
It's when all of a sudden he became very serious.
No. Di actually emailed our boss asking to be moved to the opposite side of the office from Brian.
And the way she told me the story, you know, coming off of a couple years of all of us working together where there was no love interest, maybe there was on Brian's part, not quite yet on Di's.
Seeing Brian and Diana together for the first time, I knew it was something special. There was something different about Diana.
You could tell as she was telling the story, she just was so excited.
Well, the song was playing, and I happened to look over, and I catch a glimpse of the two of them. And somehow they're kind of off on their own, but they are full on jamming out. Like jumping, singing, dancing. I think there was air guitar going on.
At one point there's some story about him actually taking her up to the bow of the ship. And they were leaning over the rails, and I think he did something like he was proclaiming he was king of the world. And, you know, and she put her arms out and, you know, said she felt like she was flying, and it was just this glorious moment.
Because he was annoying her, he was always in her cube, he was torturing her, not letting her get her work done. So our boss approached me very concerned.
She goes running over and sits down in the chair next to him, and she just kind of grabs his arm like this, snuggles up.
And Di started telling the story about how, I don't even remember what the story was.
Wait a second, hang on. That's the plot to Titanic. I'm sorry. Way off base, way off base.
When I was 100% sure was the next June 2010, Brian planned a surprise birthday party for Di. And it wasn't that he even planned the surprise birthday party. It was the next night, Saturday.
When I finally met Diana for the first time up in New York, I knew that she was perfect for him.
I told Di I would never, ever, ever tell anyone that I saw this video because it was this really special thing that Brian did for her. So I'm sorry, Di.
I don't even know if Di and Brett know this, but every time I hear that song, they are the only two people that I think of.
Brian happened to be in Munich for Oktoberfest. He gives her a call and he says, Di, I want to meet your brother. So he changed his whole plans and came from Oktoberfest just to meet us in Barcelona.
I actually said to Opie, I think Brian loves her, and I think she loves Brian. So I wouldn't mess this up. Don't be the cause for them not to get together.
Hearing the fact that, you know, Brian had actually gone in for the kiss and she swore it didn't actually happen.
Her face lit up, and his face lit up, and I thought, oh boy, this is serious.
Not 1912, but 2010. I think Brian had actually taken me to this bar. It was called St. Mark's Ale House. He kept dragging me there like almost every weekend.
The night he was in jail and ultimately called Diana to bail him out instead of me. It was a sad day.
Brian just comes in and he got the goofy side of Di going, and that's when I really knew because he started singing, hello my baby, hello my darling, hello my hometown gal.
In our same bed and breakfast in another room, and spent the entire trip with us. And it was just so much fun, and the whole time Diana's whole demeanor changed. She was just so excited the whole time.
Changed a young man from being the happy-go-lucky guy to seriously
knowing he's doing the right thing, marrying a beautiful girl.
But she was telling me the story, and I looked over at Brian, and he was glowing, just like.
And I just remember thinking, they are having the most fun right now.
I knew that for him there was no turning back.
And I secretly thought, I like the sound of this girl.
The fact that she was kind of open to it, she seemed a little excited and was about to give this guy a real shot.
She was a happier Diana, one I've never seen before, and it's because of Brian.
He told me flat out one night, he's like, Diana is going to be the woman that I'm going to marry. I love her with all my heart.
For a while, after all this showering of coffee and chocolate and gifts, that's when I realized Di was really into Bri, but she didn't want anyone to know about it. I don't think she wanted herself to know about it.
I was like, of course, you don't have to tell me. Of course I can see it, man. I see it in you guys. Like, just the way they look at each other, you can tell.
Secretly, deep down, after this reverse psychology type stuff, you kind of realize that she was actually really into Brian.
See it all the time at work. Perfect place for that.
During that moment, I knew that the two of them were madly in love with each other. And you could see it through the pictures.
She didn't really have to say or do anything. You could just tell the way she acted, the words she used. She would be silly, and yeah, you could just see it was all over her.
You could tell that she was excited.
Whenever I think of them, that's how they always are. They have the best time together.
When Di started doing the same dance and song, I knew she got him, he got her, and that's how I knew.
He just was happy and content and at peace, kind of, is what I would say. And I knew that she found the right guy.
I still see that excitement in her eyes today when she's with Brian, when she talks about Brian, and that's when I knew they were in love.
And I knew he was in love with Diana.
And I knew right then, and I was like, dang it, Di, you took O'Neill from me, congratulations.
But finally, when he deactivated his JDate account a month ago, that's when I knew he was serious and in love.
Obviously, hear it in Di's voice, how much she loved him, and how much I could tell that he loved her. And it was pretty cool, and that's when I knew.
And it was a very serious moment in his life. And that's when I knew.
So that's how it all started. And Brian didn't love me. So that stinks.
That was the first time I knew that was pretty much the beginning of the rest of their life.
And that's how I knew.
They're just an amazing couple. And that's when I knew.
But it was that moment in the bar when I first knew.
I first knew I was in love with Brian.
First time I knew I was in love with Di.
I just out for drinks one night with a bunch of coworkers.
Was actually a buildup of events.
The two of us kind of wandered off ourselves.
I was always attracted and interested in Diana.
So we had a really serious conversation, and I just started to have a feeling then.
The more I got to know her family, the more I got to know her friends, the more trips I went on with her, the more time I spent with her.
And I vividly remember a dinner that we had in the East Village, and I know he remembers this dinner.
It really all came together after about a year or two.
Where we really opened up, and that's when I knew.
Those factors kind of shaped her into who she is, and that's when I knew I was in love with her.